Hey there, I'm Scott. This is Tangents. Well, recording one of these at night once again. Was doing the day mostly, and I've just been too busy during the day, mostly with meetings and often working on projects. Um, I enjoy the people I work with, but some of the projects we're working on, not my favorite things to be working on. I have a lot of other things that I would like to get to. This giant pile that's ever growing, and you know, I have to do a bunch of stuff that I don't like, hopefully to get to the pile that I like, or at least that's the thought. But we'll see. I do feel like I'm slowly making some kind of progress in my career and in life, but I really, I don't know. We'll see. I look back in a couple years and either yeah, or like maybe it's completely obvious, or maybe not at all. We'll really see. Today I wanted to talk about being unreligious, and specifically, well, I have a lot of things that kind of prompted me to talk about this. I'm sure I've brought it up before, but I went through trying not to duplicate the names for these things because I've noticed I've done that more than a few times already, and I don't have that big of a bank. Uh, didn't see one on religion, which kind of surprised me because it's a thing that I talk a fair bit about. I think a lot about it. Not that I'm thinking like in my own life about religion. Certainly, like the thing that prompted this specifically was I was on Twitter and I don't know if you'd call him a mutual follower or, you know, as close as you get on Twitter to a friend, I guess. Um, Someone who I've never met, but, you know, kind of known each other for a while, was asking, what do you think the meaning of life is? And I always find this question bizarre and a little perplexing. I've never, I'm not just saying this, I've never in my life thought, what is all of this for? What is it about? I've never, it's not a question that even makes sense to me. It's not a question that occurs to me or ever has. Um, I've never thought that there would be an intrinsic external meaning to life. It's it's a bizarre concept, in fact, to me, and I think fundamentally what this kind of comes from is that I was raised without religion, and I've told more than a few Mormon missionaries. I live in Gilbert, Arizona, and you know they send the missionaries out, but they also send them in. I run into them on the street here sometimes, and they're nice, you know, but they have their little shtick they're supposed to push, and then they start talking to you about some stuff, and it's like, you know, do you ever worry about these things? You know, no, I don't worry about those things. Which is not to say, like, I'm very well aware of my own mortality. I'm aware of the mortality of others. I mean, you know, my dad died, um, I think more than half a lifetime ago, which is just hard to fathom. Time just like slips away. I've talked for sure about that many times. You think like even if I live to be very, you know, like boundary of where I live, at least historically, I don't have that many times ahead of me what I've got behind me. And at some point, I know I will wake up and I'll have the road ahead will be shorter than the road behind. Um, I'm I'm acutely aware of that. My uncle, guy who I've known from the time that I was a kid, he's I don't want to say quite in the process of dying, but it sounds from what my sister is saying, our aunt is saying, my dad's sister, his surviving sister actually. He had another sister who also died when I was younger, but his surviving sister married to this guy, and he was, you know, I've got of my relatives, I've got some relatives who I feel close to and really liked. He was one of them. Probably helped that he's kind of lefty. He and his wife both are, like graduate. Well, he has a PhD. He's a professor now. You know, just kind of vibed with him. You know, feel decently aligned. Their son, cousin who I like, generally speaking, and certainly when I was a kid, apparently slight MAGA guy. Not like, wearing the hat as far as I know, but, definitely voted for Trump probably twice and some cringe stuff. But let's not get into that now. My uncle, it seems, is kind of winding down. Very close to dying. I don't know that he's going to die today or tomorrow, but I definitely think, you can see the sun is setting, right? It's very obvious that, he's struggling, and the stuff that my aunt is telling my sister basically is, she's trying to help him through this time, and he's kind of, we would gather, asking permission from her to let go. That seems to be what he's doing. And at a certain point, in life, it's just hard and it's exhausting, and you could probably hold on or not. And if you feel like you're not getting that much out of it and you're just suffering, maybe at a certain point you just want to let go. I get that. I'm acutely aware of the finiteness of life. I've talked about this before, but when I was in high school, I had this thing where I'd wake up. I did sleep for most of my life pretty well through the night, but there were times in high school where I'd be up and kind of thinking about stuff, ruminating. And one of the things that I was thinking about was the age of the universe, 13-ish billion years. And you think about, well, that sounds like a lot of time. It's one of those things, and it's hard to wrap your mind around how long a billion years is. It's like $1 billion. It's so far outside of your conception, outside of your everyday experience, that you just, it warps your mind. I have training from physics in understanding very big and very small numbers, and I struggle to hold how much a billion is in my mind. And I have like the barest inkling of it. Most people, they think like a billion, it's like, a few thousand, a few tens of thousands. You can see this with people talking about wealth. I talk about this a lot too, but people think that like $10 million, which is a lot of money, much more money than most people will ever have in their life. Somebody who has $10 million of net worth is basically the poorest rich person. They're somebody who, you could retire, you could invest that, and you could actually be, if you live relatively modestly, middle class, but you're not doing anything yet. You could live indefinitely, pretty comfortably on that. But you're not buying like yachts. You're not buying extravagant second homes. You're not going first class everywhere. Or maybe you are, but it's like a special treat. $10 million, a lot of money. Compared to a billionaire, somebody who has $1 billion, it's nothing. It's like, I'm not saying it's pocket change, but it's so insignificant that their net worth could fluctuate by plus or minus $10 million, and they wouldn't even, it's like a rounding error. And this is somebody with $1 billion. You think about a billion years, similarly, compared to a human lifetime. Say, just for orders of magnitude's sake, say a human lifetime is roughly 100 years. Well, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, 10 million, 100 million, billion. It's hard to fucking wrap your mind. Each one of those is an order of magnitude. That's just a billion. And that's from your lifetime. Now, the age of the universe is another 10 times more than that, which is hard to fathom. The Earth, like 4.5 times that. Um, and life has only been here for a few billion years, and multicellular life, complex life, for like a billion years. And it's interesting. Like, you think the whole sort of duration of the universe is this long, but there's something. I guess it's a trick of perception. Your brain can kind of, in some sense, understand it as a thing. Like, it's hard to understand that grand scope and simultaneously the scale of a human lifetime at the same time. It's not that hard to understand the evolution and course of the universe on a geological time scale, and, independent of that, understand things on a human time scale. Putting those two together and understanding that little femtosecond of the duration of the universe is a human lifetime, that little blink, is so small. It's just, I mean, you can understand it in the sense that it is almost instantaneous. It is of no consequence on the scale of geology or cosmology. And so, I'm thinking about this. I'm in high school. I'm sitting there, and I'm churning over this. And you start thinking, like, whatever your, minor, if you will, existential crisis, whatever you do in life doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, both because of the temporal scale and just the sheer volume of the universe. If Earth suddenly became a 50-50 mix of antimatter and matter and annihilated itself, it wouldn't really have that many consequences, even nearby in the galaxy. And certainly, if you're a few galaxies away, and then you look at the number of galaxies there are, it's like, it would just be a little blip, little nothing. And that's something that probably, hopefully, will never happen. And it's certainly more than any person or organization of people could ever do. So you sort of think, like, the impact that you're going to have on the universe, pretty fucking small. But at the same time, I was thinking about this. Definitely, I had a moment where I was kind of like, ew, this is overwhelming. It kind of sucks. I wouldn't say that I was thinking, like, what is the purpose of all of this? Because I never had that thought, but it was also like, does it matter in any way? And then I thought more about it, and actually, yeah, it does matter. Not because you're going to have some massive impact on the universe at a grand scale, or some lasting impact. Most of us will be forgotten probably in less than a human lifetime. 100 years from now, I would assume people are probably not going to be thinking about me. Probably not going to be thinking about you. Yeah. And that's 100 years. And again, remember all of these orders of magnitude. Things fade. The waves wash the sands, and all those footprints that we leave just sort of fade into oblivion. But you can do things that matter immensely to individual people. And then you start thinking about this also. So, okay, the human population, I'm going to talk, again, orders of magnitude, because, I don't want to go, I kind of think in this way. The details don't matter that much, but like, it's not quite 10 billion people, but let's just, for the sake of argument, 10 billion people on the planet right now. What does that mean? Well, there are 10 billion people. Each person in the course of 1 year has a subjective experience of about 1 year. Now, strictly speaking, you could say, okay, you're asleep for part of that, and your consciousness. Let's just call it a year. If it's 3 years or a third of a year, we'll just round it to a year. 10 billion people, 10 billion years per year of experience, of subjective experiences. In the course of my lifetime, well, actually, fuck that, you don't even need it. In the course of about a year and a half, that's more subjective experience than the entire lifetime of the universe, just in human beings, just on this planet. Now, that's interesting. It's also kind of, it's a thing where you sort of contemplate the scale and scope of that. And it also makes you think, if you have problems feeling insignificant, I, yeah, the number of years in the lifetime of the universe already is a lot. And then you think about the number of subjective years that are experienced by all of the sentient beings on this planet and probably in the rest of the universe. You're talking just immense, almost inconceivable lengths of time. And so, if you're worried about being significant, probably you're worrying about the wrong thing. But again, you can make a huge difference in somebody's life. You can make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. If you're somebody who takes people out of poverty or puts people into poverty, if you're somebody who's like hoarding resources and you're some dictator and there's food coming in that's supposed to help the starving people in your country, and you just kind of suck that up before they can get to it and resell it just to enrich yourself and to kind of say fuck a bunch of people, you're causing just a huge amount of far more pain and suffering and misery than one person can conceive of in many ways, because it's the most that you've ever experienced is one unit of that. And yet this is somebody causing thousands, tens of thousands, millions of times that. So it's pretty, it's pretty massive to think about. Similarly, if you're someone, and let's just say you're in Congress. Let's just say you're somebody who could literally just press a button, vote yay or nay for something, and you have the power to make somebody's life massively better. You have the power to take, and you can't, there are lots of things that we can't fix in life. There are lots of things that we just can't, fundamentally you're stuck. If somebody has cancer, you can do a lot about that. You can advance medical science. We're much better off now than we were 10 years or certainly 50 years or 100 years ago. But it's still something where you don't have absolute reliable control. One day we might get that technology, and personally I would love that. But for the moment, it's outside of the scope of what we can do. But if you're a senator, you could do something that could just utterly change not just one life or tens or hundreds or thousands, but millions of lives. And you think, right now, until the fall, student loans are on pause. What does that mean? It means that nobody's paying, nobody's accruing interest, and you know what? It does not matter. It's a kind of interesting thing that someone could just snap their fingers and put all that shit on hold. Almost $2 trillion of debt, and there's no consequence. There's really not even like a blip, not even like a murmur. It's kind of extraordinary, and what it means, of course, is that you just cancel it all, and would have no consequence. But it would be massively important to the people who no longer have to pay. I have a small house worth of student loan debt because I've been kind of slowly building and really grinding for many years. I've not made enough money to even be paying back any of that. So I just have interest accruing upon interest, and it's ridiculous how much money I owe there. And for me, having that stuff on pause has made a massive difference. And I'm better off than most people who are in this. There are so many people. I have It's not guaranteed, but I have some paths that could easily lead me to being able to zero out my student debt, you know, in a reasonable amount of time even, and without like just, you know, completely suffering and focusing all of my efforts towards that. Not guaranteed, but it may happen. Most people have no path to that. Most people, you know, I mean, maybe they could win the lottery, or, you know, who knows? Maybe there's some kind of just gamble that they could make, or just get lucky. You know, Richard Pryor's uncle might die and leave them, you know, a shit ton of money or something. Who knows? Whatever would happen, probably they're fucked. And also, you know, like their lifetime earning capacity is probably fucking minuscule. And I mean, also, like a lot of people don't even go to school because they do this. And I hate that people do this, but it's something where like it's a completely rational thing to say, you know, if you're going to go to school, it's going to cost time and money. That's time you could be spending developing yourself in a career, making money, and now you've got something in the bank and you're further along in your career versus the opportunity cost of going to school, the investment of it, which is going to have probably no financial return for most people, especially people who, you know, if you're going into business or something that's kind of, I'm not saying that business is just bullshit, but, you know, not necessarily furthering the cause of humanity. You're doing things that are probably not really helping most people. If you're doing that, maybe you'll make some money. Maybe it has positive ROI. But if you're going into art, if you're going into philosophy, and these are things that we need, history, um, literature, even physics. A lot of people go through physics, and they're not going to make that much money. They're not going to become like, they're not going to probably be the professor who gets tenure and is making a couple hundred K. They're probably, maybe they'll be an adjunct professor making, you know, like fuck all and having no job security at all. I mean, not just at will, but essentially fired by default, and you're on an annual contract that has to get renewed constantly. You don't even have to fire somebody, you just don't renew them. You passively have fired them already. It's brilliant, the people who have come up with this kind of bullshit. Like, you think about all the ways that people fuck other people. And again, like, what are they getting out of it? That pretty much nothing. I'll tell you something else. A lot of those people are fucking religious. Yeah. So I mean, I'm circling back a little bit to that because bizarrely, I've gone off on a tangent probably. But a lot of people think about religion as, first off, I think if you're raised with it, even if you're raised just in the milieu of it, when your brain, the cement in your brain is wet, that marking, that sort of shapes how you, not just how you think, but how you conceive of reality. And it puts not just an epistemological framework around you, but the way that you can even understand like causation and purpose and ethics and morality is warped. I suspect permanently. I know have kind of escaped it, and I'm not saying that they're all like, you know, just doomed to this, but I do think most of the people, like, even if they become atheists after they're religious, they still have like remnants of it. There are so many people in my life, I've talked to so many people who say that they're not religious, but they're spiritual. And to me, I mean, I call myself unreligious or not religious. This is me up my own ass a little bit here, but I never have liked the word atheist. Not because I have any shame in calling myself that, but because I don't think it's right. It doesn't accurately describe me. And I know a lot of people who will go like, you know, well, if you're atheist, then you're saying that you know something. You know that God doesn't exist. Why not be agnostic? You know, it's like Pascal's wager, basically. And I'll tell you why in a second, but they say, I hear this a lot. And people are like, well, maybe you should just be agnostic because that's really the rational position, is because you just don't know. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's the same problem as Pascal's wager, where if you do it naively and you assume that it's either this particular religion or nothing, then sure, Pascal's wager makes sense. The problem is it's an infinitely complex tapestry of possible religions versus no religion. Yeah. All of these things, you can't have a Pascal's wager that works, because you certainly could construct one religion that says that you have to believe this, not that, and another religion that says you have to believe this, not that. You can't hedge your bets. And you could actually even have a religion that says you can't be playing that game. You can't be doing Pascal's wager. You have to really believe it. Um, yeah, I mean, you can break it a million ways. So the agnostic thing makes sense if you're thinking religion as a concept makes sense, or spirituality as a concept makes sense. Now, to me, and I think maybe this is because I watched Star Trek, The Next Generation when I was a little kid. But there's a character in there called Q. He's coming back in Picard in 2022, which is insanely half a year away, not that long. But this character Q is from, I don't know if you'd call them a species, but a civilization, if you will, that have almost any characteristic you could conceive of that you might try to attribute to a god, or gods. They have essentially functional omnipotence, omniscience. They can snap their fingers and do anything, essentially. There's, could you define the concept of a god that would in any meaningful way be distinct from a Q? I don't think so. The difference is that with the Q, you're kind of thinking, well, okay, this is, it's a very powerful civilization, but they're just, entities like you and me. They're just, like they do have the ability to do things that seem essentially magical and essentially limitless to us. But we have the ability to do things that seem magical and limitless to people even just 100, 200 years ago. I fly, I mean, not to put a too fine a point on it, I'm a fucking pilot. I fly. A couple hundred years ago, people might have thought about it. Leonardo thought about flying, but back then, flying and intentionally like steering and navigating and all this kind of stuff, hard to conceive of. People died trying to cross the country, and not just a few. If I wanted to, I could just hop in my car and drive across the country. It's, that's just one little thing. You can imagine, just humanity advances. We don't fuck things up too badly. And at some point, we have much technology to the point where we can essentially construct or deconstruct anything, make any kind of realization, have massively augmented minds that can, in the processing power and time that I am sitting here just blathering a couple words, construct an entire universe worth of depth and structure. Make something appear or disappear. And when I say make something appear, I don't mean like a hologram or a light field projection. I mean like physically make something appear. Maybe even transmute things between gold and lead. Like, if you have really advanced nuclear technology, in principle, that's a thing you could do. If you had really advanced, just say molecular nanotechnology, you could weave diamond or any material at all as easily as we make plastic, as easily as we print something at a laser printer and don't even think about something that before the printing press was not even possible except for having a scribe like physically copy stuff down. And so, I mean, you can think about this, and the concept, what I'm getting to is essentially that the concept of a god or gods, the concept of religion, the concept of a spiritual plane. I mean, okay, I'm a physicist in the sense that I have a PhD in physics. I don't know if I'm not a practicing physicist exactly, but I kind of do think of things in some sense in those terms. If there is something like you might call a spiritual plane, what is that? Well, there are two options. One, it's like an immaterial thing that somehow you can never interact with other than just your existence. And then you kind of like go down this path, and essentially it becomes something that is untestable. Like the only way you can ever observe it is through things that are like within your own head, and how that's not really it's not a way to conduct an experiment, so to speak. Or if it did exist, then it's something that in principle you could set up some kind of lab equipment, some kind of experiment to interact with it, and potentially even not just sense it but manipulate it. So it's either in that sense like a physical field of some sort, or something that to me I would say doesn't even exist. Or maybe it exists but in the conceptual sense. Like, if you imagine that the solution of every possible set of equations, if you write down a differential equation, in some sense that solution exists. And in some sense you've written down something that defines the entire set of all possible solutions with all possible initial and final conditions, and all possible, if there's a random component of that, all possible random sequences of it. Does that exist? Now you can, if I go, well, I'm going to plot x squared. Well, I'm plotting it, but if I don't plot it, it still kind of exists. You could imagine writing down the equations of the universe, and or not, just the fact that those equations might exist. The solution in that sense kind of exists. And you could say, I mean, in a very weird and real sense, the answers to like the existence of everything in that sense would just exist. I'm using exist a lot here, but it would be there just kind of in some abstract mathematical sense, whether or not it was real. Just and of course if you think that, then there's essentially almost an infinite diversity of things that would exist in a weird sense. But those are all conceptual. They're not things that I can sit here and really like tinker with. I can't measure them. I can't get a lux meter and sense how many photons are coming out of something, or any of this kind of stuff. So does it exist in a physical sense that I can measure? Yeah. Those are the two options. And so you start thinking about it, and I mean, to me also, like, and I mentioned ethics and morality, I feel like people, I do know people, and mostly not friends, but I've met and encountered people, and I've certainly seen them online, who say things like, if you're not religious, if you don't believe in heaven and hell, why would you not just go out and rape and murder people? I've seen that more than once, and that makes me want to get the fuck away from that person, because I gotta tell you, I don't need, and I don't think I'm unique here. I mean, just to be clear, I don't think that I'm like some special snowflake. I think I'm pretty typical. I do not need some imaginary, like, I don't know, corporal punishment daddy figure to sit there and into not killing people. It's just, it doesn't even, like, I do joke from time to time about certain people getting guillotined or something, but in the sense of actually like having it be a thing that I would ever consider doing, murder does not enter into my mental lexicon of concepts. Just like meaning of life. I don't think about it. I mean, except in the sense of like the meta thinking about it, never occurs to me to do. Raping someone never occurs. Like it's not a thing. It's not. It's not like I need someone to say, you know, like, oh, if you do that, you're gonna have this. Fuck that. You just don't do it. And not only don't you do it, you probably, hopefully, don't even think about doing it. And yeah, you don't need the consequence there. I've never understood. I don't know that it's necessarily even possible to be ethical or moral if you're only doing the air quote right things because you're afraid of some kind of punishment, or you think that if you do the right things, you're going to get a reward. I think that's almost it's very utilitarian, and it's kind of like, you know, okay, you're calculating, you're making a Pascal's wager kind of thing, but I don't think it makes you ethical or moral at all. In fact, I would say that somebody who, like me, is maybe a bit self-serving, but I would say if you're not religious and you behave in an ethical and a moral way, and you try to be decent and kind and all of these things, I think that counts for more, because that's just like an intrinsic thing, and you're not trying to do it to win points in some imaginary game, you know? So that's a thing that I think a lot about. I think a lot about, you know, I talk to these people who come by and they're like, you know, like, don't you ever have these questions? And then the thing that I like to say, and I say this partly because I know it fucks with them, and partly because I really mean this. I am thankful every day, and I really mean that. Pretty much every day, I'm thankful that I was not raised with religion. I'm thankful that my brain was not twisted that kind of a bizarre construct. I don't conceive of the universe, my experience within it, in those terms. And I really think that that causes a lot more problems than it solves. I do know people who think, okay, well, religion, it's bullshit, but it keeps people in line. I don't think you need that to keep people in line, first of all. I think it's a very cynical, kind of negative way of looking at people. I certainly also think it lacks imagination. You're like, oh, I'm superior to everybody else, but those plebeians definitely need the opiate of the masses to keep them, you know. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Similarly to, you know, like, if people had and not the Andrew Yang, who fortunately lost the New York mayoral race, not in his sense of UBI, but if somebody actually had not just like $1,000 a month, but imagine you had enough money that you fundamentally, or better yet, not even money, you don't need money. You are okay. You can just live. You do not have to pay rent. You do not have to pay for food. Now, if you want something beyond, like, you know, not even just subsistence, but, you know, like, you're living comfortably. But if you want something that's excessive, you want something that's really more fancy, maybe you have to pay a bit for that. Maybe you have to do something special for that. But if you just want to kind of get by and be comfortable and healthy and okay, you can just do it. I know there are people who, given those circumstances, would just play video games, which I have to tell you, I don't think a lot of people talk about that like that's a negative. I don't think it's, I'm not a video gamer, but if somebody wants to just get high, another thing that I've not done, and play video games, who gives a fuck? Does it matter? Especially given that I do think most people under those circumstances would find things to do, and they'd find, it's the thing about purpose and meaning. It's not out there, it's in here. We ascribe it to our lives and the things that we do. Things matter to us because they matter to us. And part of that is also they matter to people that matter to us. And they have a consequence, they have, you know, like an impact on other people's lives. I think most people, you know, they might not do stupid, just really busy work that is pointless and soul crushing, but most people would probably find stuff to do, and, you know, probably some of it quite productive. I know if I didn't have to work, I would still be doing stuff. And in fact, I'd be doing some of the same stuff that I'm doing now, but I wouldn't be doing the stupid stuff that I'm doing just to scrape by, where I'm, like, I don't want to quite say groveling, but, like essentially, placating people and doing their bidding, developing garbage for them. I would just be working on my own stuff. And I would do that completely independent of having any kind of potential financial reward for it. I would do it. Part of it is just because it's stuff that I want to use myself and want to make. I like learning how to do stuff like that. I I also like, if I was making, like, say, robots, just to pull a random possibility, if I was making that and developing something that could make people's lives easier and remove some toil and give you more time, I would totally do that, and it would be a very worthwhile thing to do, um, independent of any kind of possible, like, making money off of it. I don't understand. I don't think it's healthy that we have this. We live in a society really where people are obsessed with not just making money, not just living comfortably, or even a little bit more than comfortably, but they're obsessed with making all the money. Like Peter Thiel trying to take everything, being able to control something and eliminate all the. It's not just that there's competition where you can kind of like have a healthy relationship. It's competition where you're trying to kill the other person. This is like the world we live in. Your Amazon and your objective, of just Jeff Bezos is basically to destroy every other company and take all the profit that they were, like, previously was making millions of people have a, nice life, take all of that and slurp it into his own fat ass so he can sit there and have so much capital that he doesn't know what to do with, in his words, does not know what else to do with besides having a fucking space program. Yeah, like a kind of fucked up thing. Anyway, I don't want to go too much past that. I definitely also am winding down. This is the thing about doing these at night. Um, yeah, and last night, God, fucking insomnia. I do realize that I don't show how tired I am most of the time. And I actually, like, at the moment, I don't feel that tired. But last night I got, I woke, I didn't get to sleep until like 12:30. And then I woke up at like, I don't know, 2:30. And I got back to sleep like 5:30 for a little while, maybe, and then woke up. And I had a 8 o'clock call. So it was just, I don't know. And the previous night was not great. It's just like, I go back and forth. I'll have some every once in a while. Very rarely I'll have a day where I feel great. I feel like I used to, where I'm like, just awake and I don't feel tired. Almost always when that happens, I have like a rebound thing where I get even less sleep than normal that night, and then I'm fucked even more than normal for a couple of days, and then I can just like go back to my sort of standard. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm very tired. The 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 sleepiness is annoying. I would love to be able to find out what's wrong in my brain, which I'm not sure, but I suspect it's like, like this little cluster of cells just not working right, or something died, or something, I don't know, maybe I got a viral infection 10, 20 years ago, and something is like upregulating something or downregulating something, or who knows what the fuck it is. Whatever it is, something is not working. Used to work. If I could go in there and fix it and just sleep well and be rested, and, you know, not just because I want to be productive, but just, yeah, like it's a thing, like this heavy blanket, and not in a good way, not in the weighted blanket sense, but just like looms over you, and you're just constantly, you feel extra drag and not able to get a mental flow going. Like you have trouble doing stuff. I'll have things where like I'm trying to work on stuff and I'll just sit there for, not like a ridiculous amount of time, but I'll just sit there and I'll be like, I can't get moving mentally sometimes because I'm so fucking tired all the time. And I know also like my memory is deteriorating because of it. I know, like memory, one of the purposes of sleep and especially dreaming, I don't really dream. Never have, that's another thing to talk about later, but never really had like dreams per se. I've had, like flashes of experiences and feelings and thoughts or things like that, but never like a cohesive story. But I do know that in that period of sleep, you're doing things like integrating memories and, like processing stuff and kind of working on establishing long-term memories. And when you're not doing that often, it hurts. It really hurts. So with that, I am going to start winding down. It's like 9:45. Try to actually get a decent amount of sleep tonight. I always hope that I will, and someday maybe I will, but not probably anytime soon. With that, I will definitely talk more about being unreligious, but yeah, I think to go to end there, I would just say like to me the concept of God or religion or spirituality doesn't make sense. So to me, atheist is an answer. It's not that you're saying something that you certainly know, like being religious. It's not like an article of faith. It's essentially you're answering a question that to me makes no sense. You don't believe in God or gods. What does that mean? I don't even think it means anything, which is why I say I'm not religious, because to me, like, I would take that as like, you have religious and then you have kind of like agnostic and then you have atheist. And I'm like way over here where I just don't even think any of this. I think this whole dimension does not even make sense. Just it's not a thing that should exist. It's just kind of like a weird anomaly of human, you know, brains trying to answer questions that they didn't have the answer to, and rather than actually working and trying to figure it out, they just kind of made some shit up and it seemed believable, so they stuck with it. That's kind of how I see a lot of this religion. Or they had, pain and suffering and they wanted to explain it. Or they, lost people and wanted to think that that person is somehow going on. Which is an interesting thing if you take relativity seriously. This is another topic for another time, but special relativity kind of tells you several things, but one, it tells you simultaneity is not universally defined. This moment is defined only at a particular point or event, you would call it, in space-time. And, if I look at the light that flashes out of there, you have a forward light cone and a back light cone. So all of the stuff that influences that point is coming inside of that past light cone. And everything that it can possibly influence, unless there's superluminal travel, is within the forward light cone. And in that, what slice outside of those light cones you call the present, it's not well defined. And if you try to call the whole thing outside of there the present, that doesn't work either, because if you're here, that's the present. Somebody else is here, that's the present. And then your future and your past instantly become present. So it's not meaningful. So, it's an interesting thing. It kind of implies that the flow of time exists in the same sense that, like, if you imagine you're just a two-dimensional being and you can kind of like see the slice through me, my finger is still out here. Now, granted, if your time is going like this and I'm still evolving past your time, maybe the state that it was in has changed. But there's no reason to think that. And if that's not the case, then it's essentially like taking a slice, propagating through, and what was there, even though you can't get to it, is kind of somehow like still back there. which means that in a weird sense, everybody who ever has lived or ever will live is kind of there. You know, they're there. Like they're my next door neighbor is right over there, or you know, Nevada's over there. You know, I guess probably New Mexico would be over there. Nevada would be that way, but never mind that now. But you know, like it's just there. Um, that's kind of the way that I think about it in a weird sense that, yeah, like my dad is, and maybe this is a thing that gives me comfort in some sense. Oh, not really. Because obviously, like you can't interact with somebody who's back there, but all of the experiences that we had in some sense would just be there. And, you know, everybody that you know or ever knew or ever will know is just out there in that sense. That's one way of looking at it. There are many other ways of doing it, but that to me, yeah, I don't know. It's an alternative that seems kind of reasonable, and I think it's somewhat satisfying. And it's not like as satisfying as like you're gonna see that person again, but it's not totally, you know, in some sense, it's not that bad. It's you know, not like the greatest thing, but it is what it is. Anyway, I am falling asleep, so I'm totally going to. Well, I went for a walk, sweated because I live in Arizona and walking makes you sweat. Or walking outside. I'm gonna go take a shower. I will wake up. I will be wide awake, and then I'll go to bed, and then I won't be able to get to sleep, or I'll get to sleep and I'll wake up a couple hours later. That's my plan. It's probably a good plan. I think it's gonna work. With that, thank you as always. I will talk to you soon. Zaijian.